Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm author of The Snowball System and trainer to over 15,000 high-end experts all over the world on sound, effective, authentic business development techniques. I absolutely love what I do. And in today, I have so much fun with these podcasts. And today I'm joined by Dr. Ivan Misner. Dr. Misner is founder of BNI International. It's a networking group with over 10,000 chapters, over 275,000 members. And these groups have referred over $16 billion, billion with a B, in the last year alone, 2020, to each other. So if anybody knows about relationships, it's Dr. Misner. He may be the biggest expert, the best, deepest expert in the world on relationships. I mean, I don't know of anybody else who has started a networking group with 275,000 members, right? A lot of us are satisfied with like 7, but he's gone to almost 300,000. So I'm going to ask him a question today about relationships. You're going to love his advice on what we can do to establish more relationships, more authentic relationships, really cool tips and techniques in this. But before you head over there, before we get to the interview, just know that if you want a fantastic instant download that's going to give you the 8 beliefs you need to be successful at business development, and you can read this in like 8 minutes, 8 beliefs in 8 minutes, head over to growbigplaybook.com, sign up. You'll get a short little download that will change your life. It'll be transformative in how you think about business development, and then you'll be signed up to get weekly insights from us on how to grow your book of business and your relationships and your career. All right, growbigplaybook.com. Head over there right now. Do it. All right, here we go. Here's Dr. Ivan Misner on relationships. Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. And this is our 3rd episode where we're talking with Dr. Ivan Misner. Ivan is incredibly good and skilled at developing relationships and scaling with helping other people develop relationships. In fact, Ivan, isn't BNI over 275,000 members or something?
Yeah, we're at 276,000 members. I get a daily report, and as of this morning, it was just over 276,000 members, over 10,000 chapters in more than 70 countries around the world. It's been Mr. Toad's wild ride.
Would you say, and this will sound like I'm asking you to brag, and I'm not. I just want the facts. Would you say at this point you had a bigger impact on networking and relationships maybe than anybody else you can think of?
It's possible. I'll be honest. I am humbled by what BNI has become. It is just amazing to me. Last year, during the middle of COVID, this craziness of COVID, our members generated over $16 billion US worth of business during COVID. As a matter of fact, December 2020, our members passed more business than they did in December 2019. We pivoted and transitioned from in-person to online. 10,000 groups from in-person to, actually, we had 9,600 when we started the year. We ended up with 10,000. So we grew 36 years of consecutive growth. You don't see too many companies that have 36 years of consecutive growth, including COVID. And the reason for that is that it's based on, I think, healthy principles of helping one another, this idea of giver's gain, and about building relationships with people. That's the core.
Well, I love it. So we're going to run with that, man. So the idea of this question in this episode is all about if somebody came up to you and said, gosh, Ivan, I'm in a position where I want to develop more relationships. I want to deepen relationships faster and with more people. What would you tell them?
I would tell them one-to-ones are absolutely the key to making that happen. Well, a one-to-one conversation with people periodically where you get together in person if possible. If it's, if they're too far away, Zoom is great, or Skype. If you've got health things like COVID, that's the way you definitely want to do it. But a one-to-one. And I'll give you a technique that we have trained people to use. And this works best when you have somebody that kind of knows you, but you want to go deeper in that relationship. I call it the GAINS exchange, and it's an acronym. It stands for goals, accomplishments, interests, networks, and skills. Goals, accomplishments, interests, networks, and skills. And you sit down and you just write out, what are your goals? Professionally, if it's a professional meeting, what are your professional goals? What are some of your professional accomplishments? It's okay. This is where you brag a little bit about what you've accomplished. What are your interests, personal and professional? We find that interests are a great way to build a relationship. What networks you're involved? What are some special skills that you have? And when I first introduced this concept, it was in the late 90s, and I tested it with the B&I group. And it was really funny because everyone agreed to do it. And I had these two guys who were together, and one raised his hand. I came on over and he said, we don't want to do this. And I said, why? And he said, this is what he said, because it's weenie. I said, it's weenie? What do you mean?
I know what that
said,
means, yeah.
It's silly. Yeah. It's silly. It's kind of a silly thing to do. I said, okay, I get it. But would you just do it for me? And when I'm going to give you a review where you can comment, and you could say, this is silly. It was weenie. It was not worth the time. He said, yeah, okay, fine, we'll do it. So they did it. Mo, they never got past interests. In the time allotted, they didn't get past interests because you know what? They found out they were both soccer coaches for their sons' soccer teams.
Yeah.
That was it. That's the only topic they would talk about. And the amazing thing was these two guys had never given each other any referral. They'd been in the group together for almost a year. But once they found out they were soccer coaches, they shared coaching techniques. They agreed to videotape the competition and then share it. They would scout for each other. Within 6 weeks, they had both given each other referrals. Even though they'd never given each other a referral before, that one-to-one made such a good connection where they cared about each other. And their reticular activating system, that part of the brain that pays attention to the things you think are important, that was ignited for them. And they started giving each other referrals. So yeah, I think one-to-ones are the most important thing in building relationships.
Well, I love it, Ivan. And it reminds me of some research. Dr. Jerry Berger, I think out of Santa Clara, found that people do more business with people they like. And the number one correlation was commonality. Do we have things in common? So when you talked about the soccer store, I'm like, boom, commonality.
That's it.
I love the gains idea. I wrote it down. I think it's great. That could be let me double click on that. So let's say there's a lawyer that's in the audience that's listening to this or watching this, and they've got an accountant that they think they could share some referrals or something like that. They're going to think about getting together. Should they just send an agenda to each other where they're going to say, go through GAINS in that order?
Yeah, if it's somebody you don't know, sometimes they think it's a kind of a little wacky of an idea.
A little pushy.
So, I've done it, but then kind of people expect that from me because I'm a networking guy. So this is a thing that I do. So they're okay with it. Use your best judgment. You got to feel comfortable with it. You could go to the meeting without telling them in advance and say, when I do one-to-ones, I like to have it a little bit structured. I do a thing called gains exchange, and it starts with goals. I've written mine out. I'm going to give you mine. But I thought maybe we could share. I'd like to tell you what some of my professional goals are. Would you mind then sharing your professional goals? And you could do it on the spot. And I have found people will always play along with that process. Yeah. And then when you talk about accomplishments and interests, and you go first, then let them go. And it works. I don't know how to say it other than it really, really works. You don't have to say it in advance for people that you don't know because they'll think it's a little odd.
Yeah. It could be a bit structured. Well, I want to do I before A. So let's say somebody's preparing for a virtual lunch they're going to have with this potential partner of theirs, a strategic partner outside the organization. They hope they can hope maybe get some help over time, build that relationship like you talk about. What are some very specific versions of those questions? Let's just go through goals and accomplishes, interests. Let's go through each 5. And I'd like you to just on a silver platter, tell our audience what's the perfect way to ask the goals question and then so on through the 5.
Well, the perfect way to do it is for you to model it. So you say, I want to go through what my goals are, accomplishments, some of my interests, and you lay it out. And you say, let's start with goals. Here are some of my professional goals. Here are some of my personal goals. And so if you model it, then they go, okay, that's what he's looking for. That's what she's looking for. And then they can repeat it back, but with their own personal goals, with their own personal accomplishments. So it's all about modeling it first with somebody who's never seen it.
Yeah.
It's like you gotta see it done in order to do it well, unless you've already bought into the concept in advance.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. It's almost like the modeling provides the example as opposed to some perfectly designed question.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay. All right. Let's do one more big one. So let's say our accountant and lawyer meet. They share these 5 things. They really groove in. They found some interest that they had in common. They didn't anticipate, but oh my gosh, they were at the same New Order concert back in '88 on the Technique tour, and they couldn't believe they were both in Chicago at the same time or whatever. They find some interest. How should folks follow up? And I know you've told us about the 24/7/30 rule, but give me some more nuance about what great follow-up looks like to deepen that relationship, say, after the 30 days.
Yeah, so I think once they've had that conversation and it's starting to wrap up, I think I would have a conversation. I would end the conversation by saying, look, you're doing some interesting things. You're doing this and this. Key back into what the other person said. You're doing this. You're doing this. I really like those things. Yep. It's possible that there might be some areas where we might be able to work together, particularly in those things. They resonate with me. Would you like to have another conversation down the road sometime soon about how we might actually make a connection on those points? Yep. And see what they say? It's a very nice way of saying, hey, I like the way you think. I like what you're doing. Maybe there's something here that we could connect on without being a hard pressure. Hey, you know what? We should be doing business together by doing this or that. That's kind of too early. You're asking for them to marry you, and you don't. It's your first date. Yeah, too early. So go slow. It's that sales seizure thing that I was talking about. People can't help themselves.
Well, and in your example, I love the specificity. It might be that you're going to speak together at a conference or on a webinar. It might be that one person wants to introduce somebody to somebody else. It might, who knows what it is, but there's some specificity to it, and it's aligned with with the things that you talked about.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's the key.
That is the key. And here's another point. Before I started BNI, I was a management consultant. And one of the things that I always did in making a connection with somebody is when they expressed a problem or a need, my mind would be just rattling, what have I read that deals with that issue? Yep. And then, so at the end of a one-to-one with somebody, I would recommend that they say, hey, you talked about this particular issue. You're interested in an article. I read something recently. I can send you a link on that and see if that's of any value to you. People always say yes to that. Now you have a very specific reason to reconnect with them, send them the link. What are you doing? You're giving. Yep. You're not asking for anything. You're giving something to them. That's the way you build a relationship, is by giving. You talked about the battery concept. It's social capital. Social capital is a lot like financial capital. The bank has this crazy idea that you actually have to put money in the bank before you write a check. But we sometimes write a check on a social relationship where we've not invested. So when you ask for something from somebody, it really helps if you invest in it first before you ask for anything.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's exactly right. All right, everybody, audience, check this out. If you haven't watched our prior episodes where Ivan and I go back and forth on things like his biggest idea on how to grow your book of business, your relationships, and your career, how to bring in more opportunities, how to grow things commercially. Of course, this one's all about relationships. Go back and listen to those other ones. And what's coming up next is I'm going to ask Ivan, how do we hack our own habits to keep up with building this relationship ecosystem, even when we're really busy? So, hey, one last thing, Ivan. People are going to want to hear more from your content. They're going to dig in more. Where should they go? IvanMisner.com. That's my blog. If you do a search on Gains, Gains, you'll find some blogs on that. And of course, anybody interested in BNI is BNI.com. I love it. Thank you. All right.